What really happened? Summary and conclusion. World War II, Operation Paperclip, Operation High Jump, the Roswell Crash, and after. The end of World War II would show us all the beginnings of the New World Order. The Zionist takeover and occupation of America and anywhere the Operation Paperclip personnel were relocated to. The Nazi Party, or the Party of the National Zionists, would join the controllers and subvert the entire world, creating a fake space race and the agenda of outer space. This is the global agenda for the enslavement of mankind. The video or segments you have seen illustrate the deception we have all been put through. The official version of history was the deliberate falsification and rewriting of our story. Why and how this has happened can only lead anyone who researches to see the larger conspiracies. By understanding this, we can stand firm in the truth backed by fact and avoid the next deception we will all face. The staged alien invasion, or Project Bluebeam, is one of these deceptions. Summarizing what we have learned by examining the timeline. World War II ends with the supposed dropping of atomic weapons on the civilian population of Japan. The world would then submit to the controllers due to the threat of reset type weapons. The Second Great War would show the people of the world the lengths the controllers would go to in obtaining their New World Order. In 1945, Operation Paperclip begins, and also in 1945, the United Nations is established, holding their first meeting. United Nations are united kingdoms. That's where the term United States and United Nations come from. They are united kingdoms, united nations, and united states. In 1946, the Nuremberg trial ends. We know this was a staged event due to Operation Paperclip taking effect. In 1946 and 1947, Operation High Jump would begin. Then in 1947, the CIA is established. This would provide funding for black projects and the colonization of land outside of our terrestrial realm. Also, it would aid in Operation Paperclip and locate any personnel or group who would oppose the controllers or the Zionist occupation. Sex trafficking, drug trafficking, assassinations, mind control, subversion, and on and on and on is what the CIA is known for. Then in 1947, the Roswell crash would take place, pushing the need to prepare for threats from outer space. The alien deception would be a large part of this operation. Congress approves $12 billion in funding for European nations. This is the beginning of laundering money from the U.S. taxpayer to the deep state players and operations. Then in 1948, President Truman wins a behind victory, remaining the 33rd president. All of this was done with newly implemented vote tabulating machines. Same tactics aided by the CIA to rig elections and push the chosen candidate forward. In 1949, Israel is created. This would give the Jewish Zionist land to occupy that was once shared by Muslims, Catholics, and Jews, formerly Palestine, but then occupied by Jews to create an environment needed to push biblical events forward. Then in 1949, Captain James Gallagher successfully flies around the globe without refueling or without stopping, refueling 4 times in air. This would begin the deception of the globe and the Earth being a planet floating in space. We know he was probably just going around the outer edge of our realm, but they are slowly starting to implement the term globe and space for the next deceptions of the space race. From this event, the controllers would plant the seeds needed to begin the deception of the space race and the Cold War. The globe terminology would be presented to change the perception of all those who would be forced into the new reality with aid from the TV. In 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is signed. This would be a treaty to install Nazis or National Zionists into governments throughout our realm. NATO, or the Nazi American Terrorist Organization, would infest governments or allied countries and force them all to comply with world government policies and UN directives. Then in 1950, the most important part of this operation would be the baby boom. This is when the baby boom would begin. This would teach the population of America and all NATO UN countries the new version of reality needed to birth the new world order. The baby boomers would all be raised from birth by the television and the culture created by the CIA. The nuclear family would begin to ensure the creation of the New World Order. The globe model and the theories connected to it, from global warming to climate change and overpopulation. This is where all of this deception would really begin being pushed onto the baby boom generation by the television. Then in 1951, investigations into Las Vegas gambling would show a yearly profit of $20 billion. The CIA and the FBI would see this as a potential revenue stream and a way of laundering money through these casinos and gambling. Organized crime would move in to remove the money and launder it for the CIA and the FBI. The mob, organized crime, is all a Masonic Jewish type operation. In 1952, Dwight D. Eisenhower becomes the 34th President of the United States. In 1952, the first hydrogen bomb is exploded at Inwitawk Atoll in the Pacific Ocean. This is more testing of weapons that would show the people the power of the controllers and the capabilities of these weapons. In 1953, the CIA aids in the overthrow of the Iranian government, eliminating threats to Israel. Anyone who would oppose the Zionist occupation of Palestine would then become a target of the CIA and the Zionist occupied governments around the world. The Zionist occupation of the world was in full effect after Operation Paperclip would begin, and these little events would all be by Operation Paperclip personnel. In 1953, we also see the start of the Cold War with the Soviet Union and the U.S. all expanding their nuclear stockpiles and bombs and stuff. All governments would know that a third world war would take place between all nations. The space race would buy time, but all those involved in the Second and even First World War would know the true enemy was never defeated. Then in 1953, the first color TVs are sold in the US. The color TVs and the operations of the television was the actual true purpose of Operation Paperclip. Scientists being brought to the US after World War II. The TV would control the general public and deliver the stories needed to install mind control programming and the controlling of the population. So anything that was presented to the people by the TV would be fact. And you see this the most within the baby boomer generation, that everything they see on TV is basically what their point of view is. They all support the narratives given to them by the television and the dinosaur mainstream media. And that's why they are the biggest hurdle to overcome. Then in 1954, the Greada Treaty begins. This was the exchange programs with ETs or entities to trade human subjects for technology. The entities in question were the same entities in contact with the Nazi SS during World War II. The entire operation was the beginning of the harvesting of adrenochrome to secure a peaceful period in time so they could infiltrate more and continue their control. As long as the gray aliens or the demonic entities were given a continued supply of humans and the chemical compound known as adrenochrome, the people could live their lives and enjoy some type of peaceful life. This treaty would show the people, or should show the people, who the true masters of the Zionist occupation are. Then in 1954, the first large scale vaccinations of the public would begin. This would be for the polio epidemic, but would also be a tool of the controllers to control the population and slowly change the genetics or the DNA of the population. In 1954, also, anti gravity and free energy is mastered as a technology, but then suppressed. The controllers would not let this technology be released to the public, and the public would remain a slave force for the entities or the Zionists in control, keeping us on fossil fuels and technology that would control us. Then 1955, the first McDonald's restaurant is open, and the chain of McDonald's restaurants would begin to grow. I think this was a CIA operation and could be a cover operation to conceal the amount of bodies that would pile up from the harvesting of the missing people and the creation of adrenochrome. The population of America would be fed the bodies of those who would go missing. The McDonald's beef would often contain human DNA, and the McDonald's would become a global corporation and global operation to cover up for the missing people and feeding of human beings to the general population. Then, after that, or around the same time, the Disneyland complex is opened, said to connect to an underworld or a deep underground military base or complex. The Disney park is said to be constructed on top of a city of lizard people or reptilians with access points throughout Los Angeles. One of them being the Playboy Mansion, the Getty Museum, the Griffith Observatory, and all these different locations are where you can access this underworld city of these lizard people. Disney would be a key component in the space deception, and Operation Paperclip would provide the personnel needed to stage moon landings, moonwalks, all the fake deception from that time period would all be from the Disney corporation. Then in 1955, the Rosa Parks Civil Rights False Flag Operation would take place. This was a key event to create racial division. From this event, more events would be triggered to create the narrative of racism and eventually place all racial injustice on the white American population, never the white Jewish population. Rosa Parks was an Eastern Star member, showing us always that there's a secret hidden hand of Freemasonry behind all these major events that are forced onto the people and aided with the TV. Then in 1956, the Federal Highway Act is signed. This would provide funding and a cover story for the interstate highway system. America would be beefed up and prepared for the coming Third World War. America would also use the funding for this highway system to create many underground facilities or deep underground military bases. Then, like right after that, the first transatlantic telephone cables would begin operation. This would provide power and communications to the underground structures. Then in 1957, the space race with the Soviets would officially begin, securing almost unlimited funding for black projects and the creation for out of our realm colonization, as well as the creation of the deep underground military bases. Then in 1957, the Soviets launched Sputnik 1 satellite, and then the Americans would launch a failed attempt at a satellite launch into orbit. Then the US would launch Explorer 1 satellite, which we found that these satellites are all a deception because they're all held into the air by balloons. But all of these launches had ulterior motives to what they were really doing. Then in 1958, a 7.5 earthquake occurs in Alaska and would produce a mega tsunami. This was most likely a testing of direct energy weapons or the HARP system, where once they mastered this HARP technology and found out how to manipulate the our realm through earthquakes and stuff, they would then beef up these programs and make them larger and larger and larger onto a realm wide or a global scale. And Alaska was also one of the locations of the early 1800s expositions. So we know there is the architecture connected with the old world within Alaska. So then 1958, NASA is founded. NASA is the National Aeronautics and Space Agency, and it's all a deception to push the idea of space onto the people. NASA would be used to justify Operation Paperclip, and NASA is actually the Nazi American Space Agency. Then in 1959, the Soviets launch a satellite which orbits the sun and then also orbits the moon. All a fabricated lie, never actually proven or verified. The Russians would have known the deceptions of space and the falseness of the globe claims. Everything produced after Operation Paperclip must be questioned, and then soon after, Operation Paperclip would end because all personnel were all inserted into whatever programs they were needed. And here's a couple quotes from Polish cosmonaut saying the Earth is flat, as some expected, but I did not expect this question. I assure you it is flat. And then Soviet cosmonaut, we haven't been to space. If someone claims that we have been, it is not true. It is not the truth. All non Operation Paperclip science people can understand the premises of flat Earth and how it's all a Masonic Jewish type deception. But from this time period, the lies were so good, it has completely changed the reality we live in today. Then in 1960, President Eisenhower completes his second term and warns the public about the dangers of the military industrial complex. This would be the NASA and space, and giving them unlimited funding would turn as a detriment to mankind. In 1961, President Kennedy becomes the 35th President of the United States. Also, in that year, the construction of the Berlin Wall would begin. And this is where you see the controllers really understanding the Third World War would be coming. And the narrative at the time was that nuclear war could break out at any minute with the Soviets and World War III would begin. We all know that's a deception because both sides would have been working together because of Operation Paperclip and the secrets of secret societies working within governments. Then in 1961, President Kennedy announces the goal of putting a man on the moon. This would be a major goal of the controllers and the New World Order people to push the narrative of space and the globe. The globe would equal a need to enforce global policies and, in turn, make a new world order to ensure the protection and propaganda of mankind destroying the planet with pollution and climate change, and we need lower populations because we're killing this planet in space and stuff like that. This is kind of where all that deception begins. And then you see throughout every 10 years, they would go with global cooling. There's going to be an ice age, then global warming. The ice is all melting and it's going to flood our realm, then back to global cooling, and then back to global warming. And then after they've done that a few times, they don't go with warming or cooling, they just stick with climate change. And that's where we are now. NASA and other government groups would have the technology needed to free the population from pollution and global warming, etc., giving us free energy, running our cars off water, and making no pollution. But they would suppress this technology to push their world government policies and push their controlling paradigms. Then 1962, John Glenn orbits Earth, which is basically just going up, flying in a circle, and coming back down in our terrestrial realm. And also at the same time is the first signs of conflict in Vietnam, followed by the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is more continuation of World War II by creating fear throughout the population and creating artificial conflicts to create funding that can use to be laundered, can be used to launder money and remove the wealth from all NATO countries, moving them directly into the hands of the New World Order type controllers. In 1962, Operation Northwoods takes place, which was a false flag operation to blow up passenger airplanes and blame it on Cuba as a way to create war. These false flags are always a way that war is created and used to start a a war to create funding. It's the number one tool of the controllers, from flying planes into buildings and blaming it on the Muslim world, when it's always the Zionist occupied government who are doing these operations to blame on someone else to further their Zionist occupation, New World Order type agendas. Then 1963, President Kennedy tries to eliminate the Federal Reserve banking system. He also warns the public of the dangers of secret societies, secret groups, secret oaths, secret handshakes, and all these types of things. And then later, on November 22nd, 1963, President Kennedy is assassinated in Dallas by the CIA and the Mossad, all to remove any obstacles in the way of achieving a new world order and eventually the Third World War. As we have seen throughout history and our historical record, the same agendas and hidden hand operatives in place to steer society in the direction needed to push the Zionist occupation and the controllers themselves forward. We must learn these tricks and traps to avoid being targeted by these controllers for the next deception, which will be the launching of nuclear weapons throughout our realm, causing a nuclear winter. Then the Project Bluebeam starts up, and the people are begging for world government to save us from the aliens and all this stuff. They could even blame the launching of nuclear weapons on the UFOs and aliens, and this is the final card of the New World Order agenda. Understanding this research. If you do not understand the implications of the information gained, it should be undeniable. Wars never happen the way we are told. The US and Germany were both under the control of the controllers or the Zionists. Both have been used since the corporatization of the U.S. in 1871, with the Act of 1871, which was the same time Germany was established. These countries became bankrupt, and then the republic would become dormant as a corporation, these countries could operate as entities without any rules or laws, and no peoples could try these government groups in a court of law because they are a corporate entity and people do not understand what this truly means. So, everything within this research points to the fall of the old world and the reset of humanity or mankind. After the world was depopulated, civilization would be restarted. This is where the truth would be concealed and history would be rewritten. The former kingdoms of Tartary would be used against one another until they would all be reimagined into the eyes of the controllers. We used to have a united world under the guidance and rule of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, Jesus Christ. The King of Tartary was Jesus Christ. This is why the Zionist controllers hide this and rewrote our historical record and started the deception of millions and millions and billions of years of the solar system and dinosaurs. And they create any narrative or theory they need to push the timeline back to make everyone unsure of what was really going on. And the from the rewriting of our historical record, we see everything the old world had in reverse, denying the freedom to the individual and transforming God's creation into a slave race. The same type of slavery pushed on God's people in the time of Moses, when Moses would have led the slaves out of Israel, which could have been America, could have been wherever it was. But God showed his power in freeing the future generations of God's people, God's chosen people, which would be the future Christians. Then the genetic replication. of humanity created new experiments of science. This is where the theories of human cloning and repopulation of our world would take place. We know the world was repopulated with incubator babies and delivered throughout our realm by the orphan trains. Why couldn't the Nazis have done the same thing to create a fighting force? Why couldn't all wars be fought by cloned armies? It is a theory, but also a possibility we must not overlook. After the reset, all evidence would be covered up, and the story of history would be rewritten to fit any narrative or version of reality needed to push the agendas that the controllers needed. Was this a cloned army? After the war, all evidence would have been covered up, and then you would see the Germans forcibly starved to death in the Truman death camps, covering up all evidence of human cloning if that was what was going on. I'm starting to think this is going on more and more and more. And we would kind of understand this because they're already talking about artificial wombs and creating robots and all this stuff. So if the people do not fight in the Third World War, they will create a cloned army to do the fighting for them, and they will force you into combat no matter what. They have to get their Third World War in order to obtain the New World Order. Now, was this all a covert way of covering up the truth and rewriting our story? I'll ask you, what really happened? We don't know, but we are understanding that what they tell us is not the truth. If you enjoyed this video, please check out some of my other videos and understand that 99% of this research can be found in my book, The Great Awakening. Here you can see The Great Awakening Unit 1, Timeline of Historical Events, where we go through the timeline and investigate the claims of these controllers or the claims of his story. Then it goes into the Great Awakening Unit 2, Continued Points of Study, where we get more into the conspiracy theory aspects of our research. You can get the Great Awakening on an ebook or a digital download, or you can buy the Great Awakening on lulu.com, Unit 1 and Unit 2 together, combined in a paperback version. It's a great conversation starter. It's a great coffee table book. You can open up this book to any point and learn something. There is so much information I've collected throughout my years and years of research. You can find me on Mud Fossil Research and Truth, Mud Fossil Truth and Research on Instagram for the time being, and on Twitter in the box below at mudfossil_guy, at mudfossil_truth. I just lost another Twitter account. It seems like they are really buckling down on the censorship as we move closer and closer to this November 5th election. Whatever's going to happen will happen, but as long as we can continue to voice the truth, we will continue on trying to awaken the public. You can get all these videos, all this information is free on Rumble and BitChute at Modern American Gangster, and also on YouTube at Mudfossil Research and Truth. If you would like to donate, these videos take lots and lots of time to produce, and any types of donations are welcomed. And you can find me on PayPal at mudfossil124875. If you have the ability or the means to donate, please do so. It really helps out so I can try to advertise this page, advertise on Instagram, advertise on Twitter, and really get this information out. I This takes a lot of time and resources to put all this information together, edit these videos. I'm constantly having to buy more memory and things like that because this takes up so much time and resources. So if you can donate, please do so. I do appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Please like this video. Please leave a thumbs up. Leave me any questions or comments you may have. You can try to message me or contact me on Instagram, Twitter, wherever you can contact me if you have any questions. Thank you all for watching. I truly hope this video has made you think or at least question the official version of history or even the official version of our reality. The only way we will defeat the controllers or the New World Order is asking the questions that never seem to have answers. By doing this and acknowledging the answers we are given is never the truth, we can then begin to form our own theories as to what happened. Thank you all once again. All of this information is free on my platforms or sites, but I am only one person with a computer. Please help support my research for truth and research for truth backed by fact. Information gained gives you the power needed to stand firm in a foundation of truth, and the truth backed by fact will set us all free. The end. Thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed.